Hello guys, I am back with another episode. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and the message reads like this. Hello brother, how are you? I hope that you are okay. Can you please hide my identity just in case someone identifies me? My story goes like this. I fell in love with my boyfriend, whom I grew up with in the same village that we come from. Later on, my boyfriend told me that he wanted to marry me, and I agreed. My boyfriend is a bus driver. You see, these buses that do cross-border travel between Johannesburg going to Zimbabwe. I got married because he had a lot of money, and my relatives were quite happy. Even my friends were happy. My partner then made it clear that Johannesburg was a fast place. It was not a place for a woman to live in. He said that Johannesburg is not a safe place for you. At that time, when he was telling me all these stories about Johannesburg, I was still staying in the village back in Zimbabwe. So I thought that everything that he was telling me about Joburg was true, but he just didn't want me to stay with him in Johannesburg. He kept on telling me that no woman should be living in Joburg because it is not a safe place. Everything happens so fast. So I was afraid of telling him that I wanted to stay with him in Johannesburg. I just said, let me stay in the village. I didn't know anything because I was just a village girl. I'd never been to the city before. I stayed at home back in the village. My husband used to send groceries, and he would come back to the village whenever their bus will be traveling back to Zimbabwe so that he can visit me. We had our first child. Then our child suddenly fell ill. When we saw that our child was this ill, we made a decision that we had to travel with him to Johannesburg because he said that there was this other private doctor whom he knew very well. He was a good doctor. So me and my partner, we traveled to Johannesburg so that I can get help for my child's problems. I went with my husband to Johannesburg, and when I arrived in Johannesburg, my husband would lock me up in our room there in the flats almost 24/7. I was not allowed to leave the house, especially when he was not around. He told me that if you just step outside of these flats, you are going to get shot. Joburg is a dangerous place. Everything happens so fast, and you are just a village girl. They will see that you are coming from the villages, then they will shoot you. And I was afraid. I never even dared to step my feet out of those flats whenever my husband will be at his work. Every time that me and him would go to his private doctor, he would accompany me. I was not even allowed to go to the shops. He will buy everything from salt to tomatoes. I had to ask him if tomatoes will be finished in the house. I would have to ask him even salt. My husband was the one who was responsible for buying all of the groceries. Even for my cosmetics and toiletries, my husband was buying everything for me. I was just afraid that Joburg was really this dangerous. We lived in a flat which was near the place where their bus used to park when it would be in Joburg waiting for its return trip back to Zimbabwe. One day, my child got very sick. I didn't know what to do, and I was afraid to step out of my house because my husband had made it clear that if I step out of my house, everyone will see that this one is a village girl, then they will shoot me. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want my child to die. So I ended up going to my neighbors. Then I knocked on their door. Then I told them that my child was not okay. My neighbor then agreed to accompany me to where my husband was working. When we arrived at that place where their bus would park when it would be in Joburg waiting for its return trip back to Zimbabwe, I was surprised because when I approached my husband, he was busy speaking with other taxi operators, and he didn't even notice me and our neighbor approaching him. And the other taxi operators, they were busy praising my husband. They were saying that my husband is a man amongst other men. He was like the Lion of Johannesburg. He was known for dating a lot of women, and he was not dating any woman. The way that they were praising my husband, they were saying that, and my husband had this kind of a speciality of dating those women with big hips. And when I looked at myself, I am just a slender woman. I was embarrassed when all of these taxi operators were busy praising my husband. My husband was a man who was well known for wearing these clothes that are only original with labels. And as for me, my husband would only buy second-hand clothes for me. Everywhere I would go, people would notice that this one is just a village girl. And when my husband will be walking around, they will see that this one, he has money. And when my husband saw me, he was embarrassed. He ran towards me because he didn't want the other taxi operators to know that here was his wife who looked so cheap like this. He ran to where I was and he asked me, "What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you that Johannesburg is very dangerous?" That is when I told him that our son was ill. He then asked someone who was also a bus conductor to accompany me to the doctor. I shed tears as I was walking away from my husband because I had seen that he was embarrassed by me. And all of these men, they were praising my husband, saying that my husband dealt in this speciality of dating women who were known to have big hips. When I looked at myself, I was left with no confidence at all. My neighbor tried as hard as he could to comfort me, but it didn't work. I kept on crying until we reached the place where the doctor was. The doctor then gave my child some injections. Then my doctor got better. Then that man who had been given an instruction by my husband to accompany me to the doctor, he asked me if I had eaten anything since morning. Then I said no. He then took me to this shop called KFC. And this was my first time. Ever since that I had moved to Johannesburg, my husband had never bought me KFC. I used to eat pap each and every day. It's not that my husband doesn't have money, but my husband is just a stingy man. I then went home and we exchanged numbers with that man that had been given an instruction to accompany me to that private doctor by my husband. We exchanged numbers, and that man said, "If you need anything or if this child falls sick again, please do not hesitate to contact me." And he said I should let him know before I have told my husband, because my husband is someone who gets very busy at work. And I said it is okay. He used to call me each and every time, and me and that man, we spoke all of the time. This was something that my husband never did. Whenever that man would call me, the first thing that he would ask me is, "How was the child doing?" I started comparing that man with my own husband. My own husband would come back sometimes from work around 2 a.m. in the morning, and when you would try to ask him about his whereabouts, he would say, "You don't ask a man about his whereabouts." Then he would just remain quiet. Winter came and it was so cold. My child did not have any warm clothes. My husband then said, "It is okay. I am going to send that man. Do you still remember him? That man that once took you to that private doctor?" And I said, "Yes, I still remember him." And I didn't tell my husband that me and that man, we were already in communication with each other. That man came and he picked me up from the place where I was staying with my husband. He took me to the mall so that I can buy my child some warm clothes. Before we went to the mall, he said, "Are you hungry?" And I said, "Yes." We first went to this KFC. Then he bought some food for me. He also bought me airtime for 100 rands. This was the first time for someone to buy me airtime for 100 rands. My husband would only buy a WhatsApp bundle for the whole month. No airtime, no what. We bought the baby's clothes, and when we were done, he said, "Why don't you buy something for yourself?" I said, "I don't have money. The money that my husband has given me to buy clothes for our child, it is not even enough. So where will I get the money to buy clothes for myself?" Then that man said, "Worry not, I will buy you something for yourself." And I said, "No, please do not do that, because if my husband finds out, you will be very angry." That man said, "No, do not worry. Let me buy you something, and you will just say that everything was on sale, and you won't even notice that I have bought this for you." Me and that man, we went to this shop called Mr. Price. Then he said, "Pick a dress that you want." I picked up a dress in Mr. Price, and that was the first time for me to wear something that was decent. Yet my husband, he has a lot of money, but he would buy second-hand clothes for me. The dress was really beautiful. When we had finished shopping, that guy who my husband had given unto me so that whenever you would be busy at work, I can go with him to the doctors or maybe shopping with him. He then gave me 300 rands. Then he said, "This is your pocket money, but you should not tell your husband about it." My husband was someone who would have money on him always, but ever since I had gotten married to him, he had never given me pocket money, never. I started talking to that guy, even though he was just a poor bus conductor, but he had a very good heart. He was more loving and romantic than my husband. That guy, he was the first man who took me to this restaurant that is called Steers. Because of him, I also went to McDonald's because of him. Yet I had a husband who had lots and lots of money, but who preferred to go out with all these women that had big calves. I started lying to my husband that the child is sick so that I can meet with that guy who was just a poor bus conductor. Every now and then I would lie to my husband that the doctors had said that I should come back for review with the child, and each and every time my husband will call that guy so that he can go with me to the doctors. Brother Nashi, may God forgive me, because I ended up sleeping with that guy. That guy showed me a lot of love, and he was more romantic than the father of my child. I returned back home to Zimbabwe after my child was okay. This was after I had realized that my husband was using this job that he had as a bus driver to be a prostitute. He had a lot of girlfriends, and all the money that he had, he was giving to all of these women that he was dating around Joburg. When I went back home, I made that decision that I was going to date his father and his younger brother. I specifically told myself that from now on, that guy who had showed me a lot of love, that guy who had bought me that first dress from Mr. Price, my father-in-law was going to replace him. When I arrived back home, I started sleeping with my father-in-law, and I also started sleeping with my husband's younger brother. I know that my husband, when he is in Joburg, a lot of men, they praise him. They think that he is the man, but he doesn't know that the fool that he thinks that he married, that uneducated villager who doesn't sleep around with other men because she is just a village woman. If my husband only knew that as for now, I am someone who can even teach him how to cheat on your partner, the day that he will find out, he will die of high blood pressure. I am not proud of what I am doing, but there are things that men can do towards women that will force you as a woman to commit adultery. I was a faithful woman who was just a simple village woman, but my husband took advantage of me because I was just an uneducated villager. I just wanted to confess all the things that I did. I hope that the Lord God will forgive me for all the things that I did. But at the moment, I am not holding back. I am dating a lot of guys in the village. In our language, there is this proverb that says, if you tie a goat to a tree and if you are selfish enough to give the goat no food to eat, be rest assured that the goat will graze from that tree that you will have tied it to. That is why I decided to sleep with my husband's father and my husband's younger brother, because my husband thought that he was very clever and I was just a stupid village woman. Dear listeners, right there was a message that I received from one of our listeners. Then I had to ask one of our admins to give us a translation. To all the men out there, let us learn from this story. This woman is saying that my husband, he has a lot of money, but just imagine that she ended up cheating on her husband because of KFC and 100 rands airtime. So please let us make sure that each and every time we just take that time to spoil our wives. Yeah, strange things do happen in this world. Let us meet again in the following episode.